Hey, this is Karl LaClair from the Wampa's Lair podcast, and you're listening to the Rebel Base Card podcast. Great pull, kid.
Get in there. You know what you're looking for?
Of course, your friend told me. Oh wait, you don't have friends.
You've seen the show, and like us, you have questions.
Ooh, that was a good one, but try this one on for size.
No question should be left off your list.
Whoa. I got a crazy theory, but hear me out.
But you better have some spares.
Oh, that was one of mine. All right, let's do this instead.
With me, as always, is my friend and Card Squadron winger.
This is Greg Cass, a.k.a. Ion Cannon.
We've recorded at home and across the U.S.
Last summer, we were from the Boston Common. This week, we're in Chicago.
This is day 3 of celebration.
The show has had many names, but the purpose is the same. Let's share some time at the table.
Ding ding, it's time for breakfast.
Welcome to the Breakfast Pack, a Rebel Base Card micro podcast series. A returning Rebel Base Card podcast series that asks more questions than it answers. Today on Breakfast Pack number 106, we take a deep look into Tales of the Underworld, the first arc. With me, of course, is my co-host and Card Squadron wingman, Gregory Cass from IonCannon.com.
Ding ding, it's breakfast time. So excited to be back, and it continues to astound me how much Star Wars dropped in April and May that we are working our way back. We're now on May 4th, right, in terms of release schedule, but excited to be here, excited to talk about this. I promised I would start this recording by passing on greetings from Ross, Popstar Indie, who invaded my basement this week and sent you a picture of himself sitting in this chair just to confuse you. But Ross is on a quest to see every Major League Baseball park in America, and at the last second he decided to jump from his New York birthday party weekend with a friend. He's like, if I got up there Monday, could we go see the game? So we had a great time watching the Rays eventually defeat the Red Sox, which I know warms your heart, and I'll pretend that means something to me. Sports ball, yay! But anyway, I'm rambling. So greetings from me, greetings from Ross. I have reclaimed my basement.
No, it was really nice, and it was kind of fun to kind of throw that in because I know, like, of course, being a Rays fan and you being a Boston fan, we are American League East rivals, but it was kind of fun to get the updates because that game, that was an extra inning game. You got free baseball, so it was back and forth, and it was great to see Ross, and I loved the Pride hats as well. That was pretty great.
But we have another guest, not Ross. Someone. Should I say better than Ross? Somebody more local than Ross. I don't know. Go ahead.
Somebody that kind of came off of the long take review conclave episode, which was riveting, by the way. It was really great because I had to do a lot of driving last weekend, and it was really great to have long take review in my ears the whole time and listening to you guys just do a great job. Karl LaClair, though, from the Wampa's Lair, who was a guest on Long Take Review for the Conclave, joins us. It's been far too long since we've had you, Karl, but thank you for coming back and helping us tackle some of the unseen Star Wars over the great celebration deluge, as it were.
I'm delighted to be back. I love hanging out with the Gregs. You guys are always such a hoot to hang out with. I've forever loved the concept of your show. Always have a great time here. And we've not yet talked about Tales of the Underworld on Wampa's Lair, and I was excited when you asked to have me on for this because I've been wanting to talk about this. This will be fun.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's one of the things when you come back. Like, I think there was a lot of kind of speculation of what they were going to. Were they going to continue this series? What was going to be the focus of? So first, I just wanted to kind of get, before we kind of dive in with some of our questions, what was your reaction, Karl, when you found out who the protagonists were of these two arcs? I know we're going to talk about, the part 2 later on, but I was just kind of curious, the subject matter for this series, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I was less than excited than I have been with the previous two. I loved Tales of the Jedi, and just even as a concept, and when they gave us Tales of the Empire the following year, I was like, oh, nuts, not more Jedi. But loved what they did there. And then when they announced this, I was like, oh, Asajj and Cad Bane, another two characters I'm not particularly crazy about, but they've done nothing but solid storytelling. I'm excited to see what they do, and they were incredible. I don't think anything has yet to touch the Dooku arc, at least for me. I think those episodes are like perfect. But yeah, these were really fun. Especially right because I think we were all asking with Bad Batch, wait, WTF? How is Asajj back? For all of us who've read the Dark Disciple novel, we know things don't end well for her. And right, of course, they meet that question right away with this first Tales of the Underworld. So, less enthused because again, I'm not a big Asajj or Cad Bane fan. I enjoy those characters just fine. But like I said, they've been doing really solid storytelling. So I was like, yeah, I trust these writers. They've been knocking it out of the park, and I think they did so once again. And I always just got a quick shout out, like Kevin Kiner just continues to crush it with Star Wars music. The Tales of the Underworld music is just phenomenal. So any chance to get new Star Wars music is always a great delight for me too. So, but yeah, how about you guys? What were your takeaways from that announcement?
I think I was much in the same place as you, right? And all these lines are artificial, but it does feel like there's kind of people who love Jedi, people who love Darksiders, people who love Troopers, and then the Underworld is another kind of faction in that. Sometimes in Star Wars tabletop, it's Underworld or it's Scum and Villainy gets used a lot, and those are great and can be really fun in terms of like a tabletop game. But I agree with you that it's never been like, oh, I can't wait. Like I'm not a big Boba Fett guy. No disrespect to those that are, but it's not a character I'm like dying to get more time with or things like that. So kind of Tales of the Underworld, great idea, and then within that, it's actually two really interesting / confusing picks, right? Because what we knew of Asajj wasn't necessarily what kind of fits into that Scum and Villainy mold, right? I mean, we had hints at who she might become, and I think they're using Underworld more like just the people left out of these big conflicts. But on the whole, they were great. I was rewatching these this afternoon with my daughter, and what stood out to me the most is the animation is off the charts beautiful. Like they've really mastered this Clone Wars Bad Batch style, and I know I'm behind on my Celebration live stream, but I think they announced a Darth Maul series in this vein, kind of, right? So I know they're gonna work more with this animation style, presumably, and they should because it's really beautiful and it shows how far. No offense intended, but if you throw in that first Clone Wars movie, it's like, oh, they've come a long way since then. So, Greg, how about you?
Well, considering it's kind of funny because with Asajj Ventress, right? I remember her from the Tartakovsky Clone Wars series, but having missed most of the Clone Wars series when it first came out, I had to kind of do the Netflix catch up. For me, it was like with both her and Cad Bane. Or Cad Bane more, I guess. I didn't really have that connection to him like a lot of folks did who really kind of embraced the Clone Wars. But I did like Asajj. And, we went through 3 seasons of The Bad Batch. And I guess we're sort of the beneficiaries of 3 seasons of, like, this is like postgraduate Clone Wars animation, right? You just talked about how great it was. And so it just kept getting better and better. And so when you get with these, it just really is off the charts as far as that's concerned. But I think now, having gone through a couple of seasons, now we're into season 3, I'm kind of more used to this sort of like, oh, these are sort of small mini stories and they don't have to go too much further. And so in which case you can go with lesser characters, especially the Tales of the Empire from last year, which was nice because you had Morgan Elsbeth that kind of tied into Ahsoka and Mandalorian, and you can kind of see these little parts. And I think, had I been there for the whole Clone Wars, this really would have made more sense because they kind of diverted every now and then and would just do these little stories on the side. And you're like, what's going on? But I would just say that I thought they were 2 interesting choices. I would say Cad Bane was probably the one I was maybe not as... It wasn't that big of a deal to me. Like, of course, we've seen, I think seeing live action Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett was like, whoa, that really took it to another level. But it was nice to get a little bit of more backstory. But I think Bad Batch with Asajj, and it was just crying for him, like, all right, obviously you're doing this on purpose. We need to see this. And I think for the most part, we got some of what we wanted, some right away. But I think there were some further questions out there, and so that's kind of what it's nice to have you both on, because I think nestled deep in the lore, and especially with Clone Wars / prequel type characters, I think you two are going to be really great bookends for this. But if this is your first time listening to The Breakfast Pack, this is a show where Greg, Karl, and I are going to kind of trade questions and comments. Now, it's going to be a little different than our typical Breakfast Pack, because this is it. This is a small series. And so in which case, there aren't any ones for us to kind of speculate on what's happening next, or maybe not. But we're going to kind of do our best to kind of trade questions. If you haven't seen Tales of the Underworld yet, stop right here. There are definitely going to be spoilers ahead. We invite you to come back, definitely catch the show, and then come back and check us out. I know some people, wait years and go back and go, oh, I finally had a chance to check up on X, Y, and Z. Now I'm going to go back and listen to some Breakfast Pack. And it all makes sense off that. But at any rate, so because Karl is our guest, we're going to let him go first. I am curious, with all 3 episodes on the table, Karl, where are you going to go first? What's your first question?
Oh, man. So, all right, my first question, and of course, this is not the first time we've heard of the Path, but this is something I am incredibly intrigued to learn more about. So my question is how much does the Empire know about the Path?
Good question. So this is me filling time. So yes, obviously, the first time we meet the Path is in the Kenobi series. So that was on my list of canon connections. And we do get a very direct connection because Obi-Wan reads the wall of that location and says Master Voss was here, and then so much of what's motivating Asajj early in these episodes is for that. So is that Quinlan is a part of it, and she might track him down. If people are listening to this and have not read Dark Disciple, that's where you'll find out that they were hot and heavy. They were knocking sabers, whatever euphemism you prefer. And so, Karl alluded to this great opening scene where just this guy named Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up, and it's fantastic. Where, Asajj has fallen during the events of that book, and Quinlan is burying her. I do wonder if somebody is like totally unfamiliar, they would be like, wait, what? Like that guy and her? Like, how did that happen? So to answer the question, I think it seems to me there's a show waiting to be made called like Star Wars: The Path that could be how they're moving these Jedi and how they're linking them around and developing this network, because it seems pretty well structured. I mean, that word can spread and that you can go there. So I'm going to say that because of all that, the Emperor has to know, the Empire, excuse me, not the dude, not Chief, but the Empire has to be aware that it's out there. And I imagine they've got Inquisitors hunting it down, right? We don't get the Inquisitors really interacting with the Path per se in Kenobi, but we know the Inquisitors are out terrorizing Tatooine just because there's a rumor that a Jedi has been in that area, and then one of the Safdie brothers, I forget which one, gets killed in Kenobi. So I think the Empire probably, and I'm actually thinking of Partagast's big room, right? There's got to be some guy who's like, there's a thing called the Path, although they're not ready to act on that yet. So I bet they're hunting it down, but I don't think they're close to shutting it down. Feels very much, I was in Concord, Massachusetts last week, and there's a nice new plaque outside one of the houses in the national park that explains that there is proof that the Underground Railroad passed through that house, which is very cool. And so because of that, connection, it feels like that's what the Path is, right? It's something where it's kind of documented, it's well known, and we're getting people to safety. So I feel like, it must be known to the Empire. What do you think, Greg?
I think so. I think in rewatching this, and having Asajj go, to a bounty hunter to ask about the Path, and it seemed like, oh yeah, even with Lyco kind of knowing it, I think it's got to be well known. How successful the Path is a curious question. Although my mind wanders back to the Kenobi series with that box full of lightsabers. You go, okay, they've gotten a number of people out, but how long has it been going? Is it at a point where it went for a while and now, like, maybe the myth after the Empire maybe shut down a bunch with Inquisitors, maybe it's more on myth now. So it'd kind of be curious where the path was in its success rate. Because at this point they might have closed down some avenues, but yet there's maybe one or two, maybe it's splintered out. Maybe it's like Hydra, right? Yeah, you lop off one and two more. Nah, I'm not going to go that way. But I do feel that it is known. I just don't know where it's at in its lifespan, but I do agree, Greg. I would love to see more done on it because I think that would make an interesting story. And of course, just seeing Quinlan Vos in this was amazing, and to see that little nod to Dark Disciple, which I have started countless times and finished exactly 0. So this was sort of like that last, like I guess this is where it's going to end. I know how the book is supposed to go. I just need to get words off the page and into my brain.
As you answer your own question, Karl, can we throw in the kind of related question to what Greg just said? Place this in the timeline for us. How are you interpreting where we are when these take place? I mean, there's kind of big bookends, but like, are we before Kenobi, after Kenobi? Are we in the OT? Are we before the OT? Where do you think we are as a part of answering about the path?
Yeah. I feel like my speculation is based off the first episode where Asajj very much sees Kenobi and Quinlan walking away. And then she emerges from the blue flames or what have you. And then
as one does.
So there's a part of me that thinks like it's very, well, I don't know. Clearly time has passed because when she does finally emerge, like it almost as if they missed it away. Like, so it kind of like the snap experience for Yelena in Hawkeye. But yeah, I think it's pre-Kenobi. And yeah, I would say somewhere within the first 5 years out from Revenge of the Sith. I don't know if there's a canon answer to that. I mean, Greg, you'd probably know better.
I don't know.
But my guess is it is on our side of the Kenobi series, and in part too, because I think this is obviously happening before Bad Batch, and Bad Batch isn't that long after.
That's a good point,
Sith, right? Yeah, she's emerging in this story, and obviously encounters the Bad Batch crew a little bit later on, and that show only takes place a couple years out from Revenge of the Sith, so it can't be long after the end of the Clone Wars. Would be my guess.
Good point.
And then to my own question, I feel like they have some sense of its existence. And now that I think one of my, honestly, probably my favorite standalone episode of all the tales is the final Barriss Offee one. I love that episode. And I do feel like the Inquisitor that shows up there might, because it seems like she's hunting for that child. So to me, like to your point, Greg C, like I do feel like they are actively trying to hunt folks down on this path, and to Greg M's point, right, how successful is this path in fact? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's I'm somewhere between like, oh, the Empire believes it's just some silly myth, but and I feel like the Empire's response is probably twofold, right? Like there's probably the propaganda answer they're giving to the galaxy if it's whispered in like a public forum. They're like, that's a myth. That doesn't exist. Yeah. The Jedi are all outlaws. They're gone. But then behind the scenes, ISB and Inquisitors are probably like, damn it, we got to find them. So lots of fingers on heads, like.
Well, your answer on the timeline was exactly right. And when I name checked Partagaz, I was like, but he's not in the picture. And then it's like, oh no, wait, he'd be around, or he'd be very young, maybe not up to the levels, and maybe the ISB isn't as in place yet. And I think you're absolutely right. I'd forgotten the piece that because this is pre-Bad Batch, this has to be very close to Revenge of the Sith. So I think you nailed that just right. Which leads me to my first question, which is I want to know about this Inquisitor guy. I think the Ahsoka set of episodes gave us an Inquisitor that was named eventually and, related to the Ahsoka novel. But this Inquisitor seems knew, and I'm looking at Karl because he's the animation guy more than I am, but I don't remember this Inquisitor before, and it seems like they go unnamed unless Greg M. read the credits really carefully. I think it's just like
It
Inquisitor.
just says Inquisitor.
Okay. So this is obviously the unanswerable question, but who do you think this guy is? And I had an answer prepared, but then Karl reminded me where like in the shadow of Revenge of the Sith actually makes that much harder, I think, in some ways.
Greg, would you like to tackle that first?
It's going to be a fairly short answer because I think it's obviously maybe one of the early ones. The fact that we don't even get a name, they might not have been into naming conventions yet. I thought it was interesting to keep stalling because I don't really have a good answer. The fact that they didn't give the Inquisitor a name, I thought was a bit telling, but I haven't seen this Inquisitor in any other one. So my feeling is just like when we saw with the Tales of the Empire with, with kind of the introduction of some of the Inquisitors there, some of the early ones didn't make it either, so it's like when you talk about the success rate of the path, I would say the success rate of the early Inquisitorius also. Well, I mean, actually the Inquisitorius in general was not very successful overall. I mean, they did hunt down some Jedi, but we lost a lot of Inquisitors. And, I have to wonder, it's like, whatever happened to the clubhouse? Did it just come, did it turn into a bazaar? Did it turn into like, I don't know what happened, but I don't have a name for him, but he wasn't around long enough, and he wasn't actually that great, to be honest with you. I didn't think he was that effective as an Inquisitor as some of the other ones were.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if he is seen in the background news. I believe it's the end of the first episode of the Barriss arc in Tales of the Empire, right, where they all take a knee as Vader strides into the room. And we do see the Inquisitor from Tales of the Jedi that Ahsoka defeats. I'm trying to remember if he's there. I don't recall. I also
maybe I was on Wikipedia earlier, and this is his only credited appearance. So I would say no, at least by cool. Wikipedia record.
What alien species is he? He looked familiar.
No? Unnamed, listed as just alien in Wikipedia.
Cool. All right, cool. Yeah, I really don't know. But yeah, because of, that's a good point you were just making, Greg, about, being that it is so early, it's got to be one of these early Inquisitors. I mean, I feel like the Grand Inquisitor was in place from day one. I feel like he was part of that plan. But yeah, this is obviously an early recruit, and it makes me think of, this isn't the answer, but it makes me think of a character from the Rise of the Dark Blade novel, where you have this particular character in the Jedi Temple who was a failed initiate, right? Like he has the ability to use the Force, but he's not particularly strong in it and wasn't quite able to hack it, I guess, as a Jedi. But they keep him on staff as like a janitor. It's like kind of demeaning, but and I'm just thinking of it could be somebody from that space, right? Like someone who was around the temple area. We obviously know temple guards also have that particular kind of relationship, like they're, to use decipher language, they're Force attuned, right? Like, but not necessarily full on Jedi. So it could have been somebody like that hanging in the wings. And those are the early recruits of like, hey, remember those guys that kind of put you in the mud? Well, we want you to tap into that power. So while I don't have a solid answer, that's just kind of where my mind goes to.
I really like that answer, and it's making me think a lot again about, there are pieces that seem like we could put into play, and I'm thinking of I think it's a season 2 Clone Wars episode where it might be Cad Bane's second appearance. He's stealing Force babies. Is that his first appearance or his second?
His first is stealing a holocron, and then the second one is the babies.
Yes, and that's right, because the holocron is the list of Force sensitive children somehow. So it makes me think about how like that's probably the start of the Inquisitorius. We don't think about it until the Empire era, but I imagine those children were going to be when those episodes came out. It was a very different time in canon, so everybody was like, "It's Mara Jade, it's the Emperor's hand," right? Like, look for a little redheaded baby. And we're obviously in a very different canon era where Mara Jade has not yet made it into the new canon. I say yet just to give the Zahn heads just a little bit of hope. I know Timothy Zahn is desperate to do it, and they'll find a way, I'm sure, eventually. So I do think that's important in terms of this question. And I hadn't really thought about it till you were speaking just now, that like there must have been like recruits who didn't make it. There's is it the Inquisitor novel, Rise of the Red Blade, where there's the sister that was unwanted? Which Star Wars novel is that? Maybe it's a High Republic thing. There was some story about like one sister was strong, the other wasn't. They took the one sister, and the other one went to the kind of the dark side.
Sounds like a High Republic book.
Or maybe I had a dream. I don't know. It's been a long week.
Well, and I think even in some of the comics, you see some of like the Inquisitor training ground, and I'm sure maybe there was even like sort of like a AA Pawtucket version of the Inquisitorius, where it's like you work your way up to, and when one of the main Inquisitors, from the club team, gets bumped off, you get regulated up or something like that. I'm mixing my sports ball metaphors, but there was a lot of Inquisitors. We don't quite sure, and early when they were numbering them, you kind of go, it seemed to be there was a finite number. Now, not so much. They tend to turn up at will, and maybe this is kind of a way for them to go, hey, we still like using them, and we don't want to make it seem like they're all gone, because of course Rebels knocks off a bunch of them. So they're handy to have around, but if you get off the numbering system, then you have a little more access to a few more NPC Inquisitors. Let's just throw another one in there, just to make Tom Gross happy. But at any rate, but that's kind of like that's my best guess.
Nice.
I am curious. I know we're kind of focusing in on the first episode, but I want to kind of go back to Asajj's choice after she goes into the water, and Mother Talzin gives her the choice of joining her sisters or staying amongst the living, but she has to pay a price. And I'm wondering, I would assume the price is her relationship with Quinlan. Mm-hmm. Knowing that, though, it's hard for me to wonder, like, why would she choose to remain living if she can't be with Quinlan Vos? And then, ergo, why even go find him? Unless it's just to prove Mother Talzin wrong. But how did you guys feel about her choice and why she did it?
Greg, that was going to be my next question, so thanks for that.
Got to steal.
No, it's cool. This is why you guys told me to prep several. I love this question, and because I was thinking the exact same thing, Greg, when I was rewatching that first episode today. I was like, yeah, why? Because right, so much of her arc in Clone Wars is about that desire to rejoin the Night Sisters after she's been cast out by Dooku, right? And so much of her character journey has been one of being cast aside, and it felt like the one place she finally found belonging was with Mother Talzin and her sisters. So I also found that curious, that to go back to the land of the living. And also, right, like you would think, all right, you can go back there and potentially reignite that spark with Quinlan, or you can stay with us. But they're even saying, if you go back, there's a price. And I'm with you, Greg. Like, I very much think it's trying to show to us that the price is you can't be with Quinlan. And I think that's why in the final episode of the arc, she chooses not to go with Lyco, because it's like, nah, that's a different journey for me now. But yeah, I find that curious as well, because a kind of a very simplistic answer is just like, well, who wouldn't want to still be alive, right? Like, right. It's just the basic sentient desire for life, physical life. It can certainly be part of that drive. But I think another part of Asajj's character that's very poignant to who she is she's a very vengeful character, right? And they've always been very clear that she's not a good guy. She's never going to become a full-on Jedi. And I think this is the best good girl version of Asajj we've ever gotten. But part of me also wonders if perhaps she wants to just go back into the world to settle some scores, right? Like that would feel very Asajj. But that also doesn't seem supported in the text either. Because, right, like when we meet her in that first episode, she's security for like some lady at a spaceport, and she, oh, what, I love this life. It's so peaceful. I go home and listen to my Brasso records and, just live my life. So yeah, I mean, so I rambled a lot to not give a solid answer, but like you say in your moniker, right? We raise more questions than answer. So I don't know, but those are my speculations, is just that innate desire to be alive, and even a little bit of just tempting the fate of like, well, if Quinlan's still out there, who knows what it could be, right? So yeah, that's my rambling non-answer, but
It's a good rambling non-answer.
Dr. Cass,
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what you think.
Good rambling non-answer. I have to do the presidential debate thing where I bracket that and say I need to go back and answer the last question. So just for the record, it was a High Republic thing. Path of Vengeance, the second of the the second of the YA books in Phase 2 of the High Republic. There's a revelation that a sister has betrayed a sister because one was selected for the Jedi and not the other. I'm leaving that a little vague so that people don't know what characters there were. But please stop sending your angry emails. I will not relinquish Ion Canon because I at least can Google well enough to hold on to the title. This is a really good question, and I thought about it like mythologically, right? To try to like expand this outwards to, the classic hero cycle has the trip to the underworld, and often the hero experiences a death, right? Like a symbolic or an actual death. Luke Skywalker falls down a really giant hole and finds a fun slippy slide at the bottom is kind of his death. Harry Potter literally dies, and Frodo essentially descends into hell and dies and is brought back. So it's this structure we're used to, and given that they're placing Asajj in the hero position, we kind of can feel like this should then be like her symbolic death and rebirth right in the middle of her story. And that's really interesting to me because so much of this feels like an epilogue or a coda, right? It didn't feel to me like we were getting the big moments of Asajj's life. It's like she's just kind of here still, right? Like she survived and is not going on. So one, maybe that's correct and she's just back for those reasons. But two, maybe this is really the start of her great heroic life. Like, couldn't this be like she's not gone by the end of this arc, right? She and her, we could say apprentice, are now off to go have adventures together. And we know, she seems a little more tied into things when she and Omega meet in a cave for a little while. I still am so mad I reread Dark Disciple for that. It's a great book, and it's good. It just was so non-essential to that episode of Bad Batch. So I think that how I read the character and why I can't quite say that this is just the start of her great heroic life is that she seems so lost, as you were saying, right? Like that she's just running security and she's just finding little adventures and finding ways to stay safe. So I think, to me, Asajj will always be about belonging. And that's, as Karl alluded to, the great arc she goes on in the Clone Wars is that she's pushed out of belonging, right? She thought finally she had been accepted by Count Dooku and then is left and then goes back to the Night Sisters and then belongs briefly, but then loses all of them. And so I do think that a natural ending would be that merger into the great spirit of green smoke or whatever it is to be a part of the Night Sister clan forever. So that suggests she has unfinished business, right? She is ghostly. She's going to come back and finish that business. I mean, she's not literally ghostly, but she's going to finish that. And so I don't know. I can't be optimistic that I think we're going to get more of her story filled in just because maybe in a comic, maybe in a novel, but it kind of feels like once you're in Tales of the Jedi, they're kind of done with you in some ways, but maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's wrong. So there's my rambling non-answer. Greg, back to you. You have to solve it because we didn't.
I do like how you ended that saying that I think that the Tales of is sort of where your story ends but doesn't end. But I do feel that her kind of not giving up is fairly consistent. And I do like the fact that she's very much wanting to, chart her own course, since a lot of things have kind of happened to her and a lot of things have kind of fallen through. Um, it, and maybe there is some unresolved business that she doesn't quite know. I mean, Maul seems like, who came back from near certain death in the Phantom Menace, really did have sort of a single point of focus. And it was kind of nice. We did see the end of his arc, and I really did kind of love how he kind of came full circle. But, I would say that Dave probably has something in the back of his head that he'd like to use Asajj for, and it's nice to see her piece still on the chessboard. And I do love it when she kind of shows up, because some of this kind of reminds me of the Bad Batch episode where she isn't really. She's like, I'm doing good reluctantly. It's just kind of like this whole arc is sort of like, all right, I can't, so somewhere there's a conscience in there, and somewhere she feels that she's still looking for a place. And I do think that it's a little bit of unresolved business for her. And that's kind of exciting. And I do kind of like that. Otherwise, you're right. The easy path would have just been to kind of go, all right, I'm joining Mother and my sisters now, and we can go live off. But that almost sounds like the most un-Asajj thing, kind of just giving it, and I'm kind of happy for it. That's why, even if it gets picked up by another book, it's like, who wrote Dark Disciple, Greg?
Delilah Dawson.
I was going to say,
right?
I think it's Christy Golden.
Oh, you're right. Carl's right. It's Christy Golden. Yes.
Give the author a chance to make a sequel and go, all right.
Yeah.
Since no one else seems to figure it out, I'd say let an author take a crack at it until they say, oh, we have, because otherwise, until Quinlan shows up, live action, I think we still got some stories left to tell. All right.
Yeah. And it's cool. The Dark Disciple novel is based off a story arc written by Katie Lucas, which is just also very cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And the book, there's an introduction by Katie as well, talking about the story and kind of handing it off to Christy. So, yeah.
That moment where Katie almost took over the company from her dad. You can just sense it. And then dude bros on the internet were nasty to the Lucases one more time, and they passed it on. It would have been interesting, right? A lot of these franchises are controlled by families. We just saw Karl's a big Bond fan. We just saw the Broccolis finally give up the rights to the Bond franchise. So it would have been interesting if the Lucases controlled it forever.
Dipped my toes into that fandom as I started reading the novels, thinking it was kind of a cool space. Didn't take me long to realize, not a cool space.
Just in time for the streaming era to die, and Amazon will do nothing with it.
Well, it's just there's a lot of dude bros there, which is not hard to believe in a James Bond fandom. So shocking.
Yeah. But they all have really
I think
nice
it's your question,
watches.
though, Karl.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So, well, all right. I'm more interested in this question. So, and this is kind of based off of the final episode with the granddad, who's a Clone Wars vet, but a Separatist vet. What do we think is the state of the galaxy? How does the galaxy now understand the Clone Wars? Do they understand it to be a sham? Do they? How are I mean, we've got some answers to this because it's in Mask of Fear, the novel. But how are Separatists being dealt with now on the other side of the Clone War? And what is the narrative, do we think, being told about them?
Great question. One of my favorite little throwaway moments, I mean, I love every minute of Andor, but in the first season, there's this throwaway moment where I think it's the conversation between Luthen and Saw, and they're going through who their allies might be, and it's like a list of all these weirdo names. And one of them is those guys are basically proto-separatists or neo-separatists or something like that. And you realize that the separatists kind of had it right, and that they belong in with the rebellion, which is, as the age I am as a fan, is very mind warping to be like, no, those were maybe the good guys. They had it right. They saw the flaws. And I think there's been a little bit more around the edges of that between Andor and that fantastic Mask of Fear novel, where people are starting to kind of piece together that there were flaws with the Republic and we should have gone. Oh, I was trying to think the other thing I read. I read a book called Revenge of the Sith for the Wampa's Lair podcast earlier this month. A great episode where I was over there discussing it. And there's a little more of that flavor in there where people kind of, Anakin at times calls, he says it in the movie, right? That Padme, you're sounding like a separatist. And it's a little more fleshed out in the novel, as so many pieces are. So I think I think those that are minded towards the rebellion eventually accept the separatists as we should have listened to them and they had a point. But at this earlier stage, I think it's that the separatists are still just traitors, right? Especially in like mainstream channels. And I don't want to get too real world, but I think it's so easy when you have a regime taking power to label something as the enemy, and then everybody who believes in that thing is a traitor and is an enemy. And that I think is what Palpatine is doing at this early stage of the kind of post Clone Wars. But I don't think the galaxy ever figures out it was a full sham, right? I mean, I guess we have Luke in Last Jedi saying the failure of the Jedi was to allow the rise of Darth Sidious, right? And I don't even think at that point they're totally aware of how those pieces were played against each other, necessarily. It bails a little onto the case of it, I think, at this time, but especially the galaxy at large would still just think separatist equals evil. In case Granddad doesn't come up again, I want to note he is played by Tony Amendola in this, which is a canon connection to the Force, Greg's favorite video game series, the Jedi Survivor video game, which he plays Eno Cordova, which he's the original order of BD1, which I would pick up Lego BD1, who sits immediately to my right, but he's very fragile. So it was kind of cool that they found a way to get a video game. It's not the same character by any means, but brought over a video game voice actor to be that. And I really liked that character. Like, I like the idea of, the episode is called One Warrior to Another. And it's like, let's heal these old wounds. And I have a question kind of related to it there. But I will say, I don't think the galaxy has a clue what really went down. I think the majority of your people think the Jedi were evil. They staged an insurrection. Thank God Palpatine saved us. He'll be on our side forever. Greg, who, just to point it out because people can't see you, is wearing an I Have Friends Everywhere shirt, which I've heard Disney lawyers are really cracking down on that logo on TeePublic and Redbubble. So be glad you got one when you did.
Yeah, I'll just put my fingers there for the next over the logo for that. Yeah, I would say that, given what we saw the Empire do to Gorman in Andor, I would say that there was probably some pretty swift retribution on the Separatist planets, and I think that although Papa Palps didn't take it personally since he helped orchestrate it, I would assume that they got the brunt of the very early retribution and takeover, and there was a lot more of the Imperial forces probably on those worlds to start with than some of the other systems that later on found that, oh crap, we were right to kind of go along. But yeah, I would say that it is kind of interesting to now, having watched Andor, it'd be interesting to see some more stories about how those separatist worlds were taken in, and was that some of the birthplace of some of the rebellion, as well as people like, obviously, Saw Gerrera, who came from one of the very early rebel groups. I'm certain that but yeah, it'd be interesting. But yeah, I think probably because they had a lot of obviously the droids were doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but I'm sure a lot of those systems had to be degunned right away.
Yeah.
Who asked that question?
You, Karl.
Yeah. I asked the question. Yeah, I mean, it's easy because I get to go after you guys and just say, yeah, I agree with you guys. Because I pretty much do. It does seem like, I think it's something that was so good about that Gorman arc is very much about showing how the Empire will actively falsify information to make other people the aggressor, right? Kind of, I don't know, like what's going on in LA. What? When you have a leader sending in troops for no reason, but yeah, let's do it anyway because we have to fabricate a lie. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me in the least that the Empire has spun the narrative that the Clone Wars were probably like a good and righteous war. And something I was a huge Civil War buff in middle school and high school, and I used to go to the local cemeteries and collect data on buried Union soldiers in the cemeteries. And Union veterans, they have a plaque more often than not, but it just says GAR, Grand Army of the Republic, which I've always loved that that's what the Army's called in Clone Wars, right? It's a nod to the Northern Army during the American Civil War. And I just think about how after the war, right, I imagine that, like, of course, the Republic, now the Empire, is lauded as these great victors, and they've evolved and transformed into something even better. But the Separatists will always just be the villains. And there will be no monuments to Count Dooku. There will be no monuments to Pong Krell. There will be no monuments for them. There will be no myth of the lost cause. It'll just be the myth of the imperial cause. But yeah. So I'm fairly certain with what we've learned, especially recently, of the way the Empire spins propaganda, that the Separatists were very much victimized even further. And that's why I really like that grandfather character, because he's become so bitter just by the mere experience of surviving war. And I think today was the third time I've watched the arc, and I'd never caught it until this time. But he's got that really cool plaque on his wall with all these like medals that are clearly the Separatist symbol on it. So he's a decorated guy, and you can't help but wonder, is there a VFW for the Separatists, right? Like, probably not. So, do these guys get to go to Empire paid for therapist to deal with the PTSD of combat? Very unlikely, right? So
it's just that droid bolted to the chair from,
I was going to say, you get your own droid
from whatever Mando episode that was.
as a parting gift.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're exactly right to link that to Civil War veterans, because in a lot of Westerns, you get that, right? You get these veterans that whichever side of the Civil War they were on, they just went out west to try to get that clean slate and start over. And that whole homestead plus the fight with the natives just comes straight out of Westerns. I mean, maybe we'll have to talk about Westerns in the Cad Bane arc too, because maybe that leans a little heavily on some Western tropes, but I think it's a little more deftly done here, and I think that's a nice connection you reminded us of.
Nice.
Can we just talk about the Gorman arc for? No, we gotta still. Okay. But
second breakfast is almost here. I swear it's gonna happen, folks.
I reread Catalyst after Andor was done, and there's a little bit of that stuff in there too. It's much more interested in the Galen Krennic story, but Poggle the Lesser, another guy not getting statues, plays a fairly prominent role in that book, and you hear a little bit about these kind of reprisals and such. So still, I had remembered that as a good read. It is a surprisingly good read for a like prelude to type novel within canon. So
that's James Luceno, right?
Yep. Yeah. Who kind of told a version of some of that with Death Star, kind of, right? It's very interesting that he got to do Death Star in Legends and then this. He
does a lot of exposition heavy stories, though. Like, I'm thinking of Darth Plagueis. Yeah. People love Darth Plagueis. It's good, but I think it's overhyped. But yeah, no, Greg, you were just saying something though that made me think of a great example of that is, like you said, with Poggle the Lesser in Catalyst. And right, we learned this in Rebels, how the Empire came in and just essentially eradicated the Geonosians. And they are the perfect fall guys. They develop the weapon, they get it started, and then they can just say, hey, these were the ones that started the war. They've got all these they've got weapons of mass destruction. We have to go in. And they go in and just wipe them all out, right? They're the perfect scapegoat. Like, that's the Geonosians are, they get it real bad.
That book plays a lot, and I swear this is relevant. It plays a lot with the fact that the Death Star plans belong to the Separatists, clearly in Attack of the Clones. They also belong to Palpatine. And so there's this question kind of in canon, I think, of like, well, who is really were the Separatists developing the Death Star and then Palpatine just took it over? Was the Republic building it? When we get to that last shot in Revenge of the Sith, right? It's Tarkin and it's the Empire Invader, so it clearly belongs to the Empire at that point. And I kept thinking, like, there's some creative canon connections here. Just make that both sides were building it, and then we know why the second one is so quickly assembled, right?
Ah.
Like if the Separatists were building one and the Republic were building one, because I haven't heard it in a long time, but you used to hear a lot of times like, oh, it took them 20 years to build the first one, then the second one's ready in 2 years. It's like, oh no, wait, there'd be an easy fix for canon to say both sides were building one.
That's fascinating. I like that.
Well, of course, the early concepts for Return of the Jedi, you had 2 Death Stars in
Right.
Return of the
That's
Jedi.
right.
All we do know is if your system, if your planet starts with the letter G, be afraid. Be very afraid in this universe.
Yeah.
Say the words. Anyway, okay. So this is more of a bigger kind of arc question. So the very basic wording is how do you define Asajj now? And the words I'd put in play are light side, dark side, good, evil, redeemed, unredeemed. How are you kind of looking at her as a character? Either, again, I know we're not all playing on the Dark Disciple full read playing field, but I think there's some interesting questions about her from the moment she kind of turns away from Dooku, what she goes through and where she ends up. You could even throw the Bad Batch scene into the mix, like where do you think she lies? And if you say Gray Jedi, I might throw something at my laptop, so please don't. But go ahead with how do you define Asajj on some of those spectrums?
I would start by saying she kind of to me is like chaotic good, right? She falls in that quadrant, if you will. And I think this is a fun conversation to have in a way, like comparing her to Ahsoka. Like, who was Ahsoka on the other side of her World Between Worlds experience, right? I saw a really funny meme on Instagram the other day of like Ahsoka sitting with a cell phone. It's just like Ahsoka during the Battle of Yavin, Endor, and Hoth. like she's back, yet she's just not participating. So Dave Filoni wasn't around yet to write her into every single story. But I love Ahsoka. No shade. But yeah, I mean, I feel like Asajj is someone who is very comfortable with her connection to the Force, does not see herself as a Jedi, does not see herself as a Sith, but just sees herself as a survivor almost. Like I feel like that's a trope that's been used a lot in recent Star Wars, right? Like that language is used a lot in Solo, referring to Han, to Beckett especially, and to Kira. And I think Asajj is somebody who, on the other side of her more awful experiences of being cast out and then watching her new sense of belonging be utterly destroyed by her once former friends, I'm using air quotes. I think Asajj is somebody who is like how we meet her at the beginning of these 3 episodes, just somebody who's enjoying a very simple, almost mundane life. And she seems very content in that. And I feel like as she rides off into the sunset with Lyko, very Last Crusade of them. I wanted to use an indie reference for Greg, and also right, she also has to tell him like, don't let go of it, let go.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
As I was watching that today, I was like, oh, it's Greg and Indian. I feel like she is just someone who will be out there to survive, but also she's going to help the little guy. I think she's going to have a soft heart for those kind of underdog stories. And thinking all the way back to one of my favorite episodes of her in the Clone Wars is the one where she helps out that team of bounty hunters, and Boba Fett is the lead on the team, and she finds out they're smuggling basically a kidnapped young woman, and she lets her go, right? Like, this is Asajj not long after serving as Dooku's assassin, and it's very clear there that her heart has softened. And that's where I see her now, is that she will be someone very much looking out for herself there. I think that's who Asajj is because of the circumstances that have been dealt to her in life. But I think that she will continue to help the underdog when and where she can. And I especially think that'll be more true if Lyko, in fact, stays with her. Right. He's very much, he was a young Jedi during Order 66, but he still very much has that young person mentality of like, this is what goodness is supposed to be. This is what doing the right thing looks like. That's what was instilled into me as a youngling. And I think he'll provide kind of this conscience, conscience for Asajj as they move forward together. So hopefully that kind of answers that really awesome question.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Chaotic
think?
good is just a great lifestyle choice. I think there's just sort of like, I'm good, but I get licensed to kind of go do what I want. I was also kind of thinking maybe lawful neutral, because I do like the fact that she kind of straddles that. And I would say that, just to make mention of the fact that the lightsaber was turned yellow, which I Greg, you could probably find in canon, like, is there an official name for it? Kind of like if you bleed a saber red, but she did that on purpose. And now it's even more interesting to kind of think of what Balin, and I would say more Balin than Shin. Shin would just be doing what Balin was doing, is coloring his lightsaber orange, not exactly red, not, so maybe it's interesting, their interpretations of, we're not with the Order anymore, we don't really feel that, but we still, or never with, she was never, she's not a Sith anymore, so she doesn't use the red, but she's not a Jedi, so she's not using the blue. And whereas Balin and Shin, they weren't, Balin was Jedi, but he wasn't exactly Sith. So it's interesting that they still sort of, there's almost feeling like they have to do this to the blade, like it's a reflection of themselves, kind of like if someone was wearing a tattoo, right? That's sort of a reflection of what I want to kind of world to see me when if I pull the blade, that's going to be the last time you see it. However, it was done on purpose. So whatever she's done, she's going through a change. She doesn't seem like she's sure, but I like the fact that she can straddle both ways, and I think Lyco was a great foil for her, because Lyco is still, even though he's been on the run for a while, he still sort of has that, sort of like binary look at things, right? Where it's still very easy. It's clear. It's black or white. Whereas she is a lot more, not shades of gray, because that would make Greg break his computer. She's more shades of yellow, let's just say, where it's like another side of things. But I like her neutrality, and I like the fact that the blade was yellow. I always like it when I see a new blade, but I do like the fact that these changes are done on purpose, but terribly not explained to us.
Well, just real quick, if you don't mind, I was just gonna say, it's really worth noting too, when we first meet her in that spaceport and Lyco gets into trouble, right? She immediately comes to his aid. She has no reason to do that, right? This is just some random kid, clearly used to be a Jedi. She has no allegiance to the Jedi. They've never done any good to her. So right out the gate, it's a very telling encounter of, she risks her neck for essentially a stranger who was also kind of a former enemy. So, to the point that you even introduced this question with Greg, is she, in fact, she is in a way redeemed. So, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I struggled. I was like pretty solid ground when I was thinking through this question on my own, putting her like she's a good guy now, right? Like she feels like she's out there to do good things in the world. But redeemed was so tough because like she committed war crimes, right? And I know in Star Wars it's like if you say sorry, then you get to be a Force ghost at the Endor campfire, even though you maybe mass murdered people. But like,
but you're not bitter about it.
It felt like it was. She hasn't atoned, and now I'm dangerously close to Karl as spiritual director, right? Like
he readjusted his headphones just for that.
How did he get his collar on that fast? Yeah. So it feels to me like the galaxy still, and the grandfather and Razi, like they all view her as like Dooku's assassin, right? In the shadow of Dooku still. Like that's what she was clearly known as. And so it would be like if Darth Vader was just like, hey, I'm cool now. Like, don't worry about it. Like I said, sorry. And so I have trouble throwing that word redeemed in, though I completely agree that she is, the word I'm going to use instead is healed. The kind of the cliche of hurt people. It's like that's what was driving her for so long. She was abandoned. She was lost. She had her master taken from her. So she was so hurt, she would do whatever she could for Dooku. And then when Dooku ditched her, she was even more hurt and plotted revenge and so on. But it feels to me that I think finding the belonging with Quinlan, maybe bumping lightsabers, and then not maybe they did.
Please stop using that analogy.
It also just doesn't seem right. But anyway, and then sorry, I don't want to get you your explicit tag repeating bumping lightsabers too often.
That's a podcast. I know there's a podcast out there called Bumping Sabers.
So I think when she comes back, I mean, again, Karl, a baptism, right? And that a baptism is not about redemption. It's about love and acceptance and belonging. Working on my Sunday school lessons that have definitely gotten cobwebs on them. And so I think maybe that when she has come back, she's healed and she doesn't wants to just kind of find her own way, wants to survive like you used for her, but is like inherently good now, I think is right, and is going to try to do the right thing. And getting the kid all the way to the path, and then like seemed a little sad riding away, but had done the right thing at every turn. So, I'm gonna go with healed, not redeemed, because she's got to give those 40 acres and a mule to a few more people before her crimes can be wiped out.
Which kind of begs the question. I really, on the one hand, even though her story's not ending, where could her story go? Does it go further, or do they still are they satisfied that, we have the character back and she has this mission and she isn't quite sure, and maybe they don't feel like they need to fill in the blanks, right? Not every mystery should be answered as much as we want to. Oh, it's interesting. I think, though, just to kind of start to kind of bring things to a close as we kind of get past the first hour here, I would like to talk, if we can, about Lyco. It's almost like the buddy cop film that I am looking for. Is it Lyco and Toro Calican? Because two sort of, younger would-be, but not quite. Who would be the better of the two, and what misadventures would they get into? But how did we feel about Lyco and his place? Because we've seen in some cases, with Jedi Survivor, right? With I when it's in my possession, it's a quote Survivor. It's more like Jedi, dead Jedi. But how do we feel having seen someone very similar, but maybe a little older, in Oh, what's the name of the Jedi in Jedi Survivor? Hello?
Cal Kestis.
Thank you. Cal, we get sort of that sort of arc, and so you almost kind of look at Lyco kind of like, are you another one of these? But, he's behind. Way behind.
He's over my shoulder judging you all the time. He's too small to see in the Zoom chat, but...
Oh, Cal. But I am kind of curious how we felt and his place in this universe and what may become of him, just to kind of round things out tonight.
Yeah, I really liked Lyco, and I thought, as we were kind of talking at the beginning, Greg, as you introduced the whole thing about, what were you guys thinking when they announced these particular characters as our next arc for Tales episodes? Right. Obviously, I'm very much a Jedi Force centered, like that's my favorite kind of Star Wars. So it's like, oh, all right, no more Force users, but I appreciate that they found a way to quickly put one right back. Well, I guess Asajj is also a Force user. Karl, get it together. Yeah, I like him because kind of what I was just saying earlier. I like how he provides this new moral compass for Asajj, and I like that he seems to be at the age where he's willing to just quickly forgive, right? Because that end of that first episode when she reveals her name, it's meant to be. We kind of get a POV shot of Lyco where it's almost like gasp and then fade to black, right? Like, and then the next episode opens with him basically saying like, "You killed people I knew," and she's like, "Yeah, I definitely did." But and this is something very prevalent throughout the Christian scriptures, but very much this idea of like children often being just so pure that they're so quick to forgive, they're so quick to accept a mistake and move on. And so I think that I don't want to like take away agency from Lyco as if he's not his own character, but in a way he is also, in part, he's there to serve Asajj's story. And I think how he serves that is as an audience to identify with that kind of innocent young character, we can also get on board with this sense of she can be forgiven, right? She's done these terrible things, and also that's not all of who she is. there has to be life on the other side of that, or else we become a system of just a cyclic system of constantly feeding back into that stuff. So I like that Lyko provides that for her, and I like that he is a different kind of young Jedi. He chooses to pale up with her rather than go off to the path, and in an interesting way, kind of to the point, the first question you asked, Greg M, why did it, or no, yeah, I think it was Greg. Yeah. Why did Asajj choose to go? Why did Lyko choose to stay with her rather than go off to the path? Right. I think that's a big statement about who he is as a character. And one of the questions I was thinking about, not trying to change things here, but like something I was thinking though was, how does Lyko understand himself now moving forward? That's always the question we ask with these post Order 66 questions is, how does a Jedi see themselves on the other side of Order 66? And I think, in an interesting way, Lyko provides this answer of, I'm a Force user who found another Force user who is going to do good in the galaxy, and I want to be part of that story, and it could be, again, like you said earlier on, Greg C, like I really do hope we have at some point get a very explicit story about the path. But maybe Lyko assumes that the path is a space where folks are congregating with the hopes of restarting a Jedi Order, right? Like, I think I did not do the Fallen Order games. I watched the first story, just the cutscenes, and I know the former Jedi that Cal hooks up with, I can't remember her name, but
Sarajinda, I believe. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. But
Yeah.
right, isn't
Sure.
part of her story she wants to restart the Jedi Order, right? Like that's why she's trying to find former Jedi. So
And she does on Jeddah, and it's freaking cool. Sorry, go on.
is that in the second one?
Where'd that come from?
But yeah, so I'm this is obviously conjecture, but or simply guesswork, but perhaps Lyko just thinks that if he goes the path, he just kind of continues to be part of that life cycle of being a Jedi, but the Jedi don't exist anymore, and maybe he just sees a more profound sense of freedom and authenticity by just staying paired up with the Asajj. Like he really seems to have built a connection with her. And that's a very Star Wars thing, right? Like a misfit finding a new connective point. So yeah, I mean, that's how I enjoy him. I think he's a really cool character, and I'd like to see more adventures with the two of them, and who knows if we'll get it.
And it's funny because as you started with, I liked I was like, wait, was he another I'm a gonna die type naming of a Star Wars? I'm a gun die. But yeah, I also liked him. Karl did not out me, but I think as soon as this trailer dropped, I immediately was like texting him and director Bennick like, oh, but it could be that Quinlan and Asajj had a son, or it could be young Balin, or it could be playing that game that I think often we fall into as Star Wars fans, looking for those connections. And so having now outed myself, I just want to say I'm really glad he's just him, right? Like I actually think this was a good chance to just introduce a new character. My unused question that I will fold into the mix here is I wanted to ask, like, just pure speculation. We don't know, like, what comes next. And I actually think Karl already answered that question. I was thinking the two of them as bounty hunters, but I like Karl's kind of corollary on that, which is like out doing good, right? Like doing what's right and helping people. And it does seem like Asajj has a strong sense of helping people despite the dangers to herself, and is starting to see the corruption of the Empire and the ways the Empire is causing suffering. And so I see her not unlike like where the Ghost Crew is at when we meet them, right? Where they're just grabbing some fruit and going to Tarkin Town, right? And just kind of helping those who are suffering. And I can see these two kind of hooked up and paired in that way. And I think that would be fantastic. So again, I'm not good on the Darth Maul announcement, but she'd be on to steal Greg's metaphor, she'd be on the chessboard for that show, right? Because that show would presumably be sometime post Bad Batch, pre Rebels, right? It would have to be, because there's no Maul post Rebels. So that would be really interesting if she's out there as a foil to him. Perhaps like the two of them could pop through. just speculating wildly and irresponsibly. So it is nice that we did keep them together, and I like that. And the question of why did he give up the path? I also think it was the unknown, right? The unknown is scary, and you don't know what they're going to do, and this had become known and comfortable, and he was ready to link up with them. I would be interested if we see them 5-10 years down the line. I bet they're not using their sabers, right? I think they're probably more kind of pure mercenary or pure bounty hunter, just to keep their identities a little under wraps. But like I'd watch that story, and I'd be excited to see Leica just as much as I would be to see Asajj. So that's a pretty powerful bit of storytelling for 3 15-minute episodes.
Yeah.
Well, and it'd be interesting to see like the attitudes of different Jedi at different stages of their life, as far as like, let's say a Jedi Knight versus like say a Padawan, and their attitude towards, whereas like the path would be a destination. Like, all right, I've been out in the real world, and I don't really want to be there. But with like it's his story is just beginning, and I think he's felt a little empowered, and especially has taken to Asajj, where like, oh, she's out there, she's doing some stuff, and she's okay. She's not just cowering, sort of. But the two of them together, and ask my son. It's like fearless at that age, and you're just like, all right, there you go. But I do agree with you, Greg. I like the fact that it's somebody new. I was trying to think of, we were talking about what from Jedi Fallen Order, Sarah Junda. I think that's the woman's name. On a much different journey as well.
Well, and one more, I wasn't expecting to talk this much Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order tonight, but one more is we get some great David W. Collins stormtroopers in this episode, which if you've played those video games, you just have to like mercilessly murder David W. Collins over and over and over again. And you're like, no, I like him. His podcast is so good. He knows so much about music. Just take him out. So he's got a little cottage industry doing the stormtrooper voices, and it was good to hear them in this one as well.
Well, and also to see Steve Bloom show up in the credits as well as D. Bradley Baker. So it's like they're still getting work. Matthew Wood was in this as well. We had Helen Slater as Imperial Tech number 3. So I just wanted to justify the fact that I'd gone through, screen captured all the credits, and then wrote it all down, thinking that I would use it at some point. But thank you for bringing up David Collins' name. But anyway, yeah, I like the character. I like it's somebody new, blank slate. Get these people out there in the universe. Somebody make a comic. Somebody make let's relax on doing Luke and Leia comics, and we got enough new characters out there. Have some fun with that, because I think we've drilled the rest of them into the ground for a while. But anyway, before we wrap up, Pringles cans review of this arc. Karl, Greg.
Up to 10 Pringles cans, so named because this is the most ridiculous, expensive collectible I've bought, which was having a Pringles can mailed to me. So up to 10 Pringles cans, 10 being fantastic, phenomenal, 1 being I would have rather been watching Star Trek.
Wow, that just came out of nowhere. And only Greg can exceed 10 Pringles cans. That's proof of it.
As this arc, I mean, I would give it at least 8 Pringle cans. I think this is a solid. It's a really solid story. It's tightly written. There's lots of good stuff in there. I think the reason I'm only giving it an 8 is because I'm still not a huge Asajj fan. This didn't necessarily change that, and that's fine. Like, it does. There's a ton of Asajj fans out there that ate this up, and I'm so delighted they got this story. The very open-endedness of it, like, kind of like, it was a little frustrating for me, because it's like, I'd like to know a little bit more where they're going. But like you were just saying, Greg, maybe we'll get a comic series. Maybe we will get something else. They'll appear in another version of Tales. Like, I would love that every May 4th we get a Tales of something. It's a really fun tradition. But yeah, I give it a solid 8. It's a very, very good story. Just a couple little points off here and there, because just the fact that it's kind of inconclusive, but what's there is very strong.
All right. Excellent. Well said.
Yeah, solid 8 sounds right to me. I'm going to agree with that score because for all those reasons you said, and like, it does in the end feel like these small tales stories are disposable, but that's how they're designed, right? They're kind of like little desserts, little treats, right? They're the, the 5-cent peanut butter cup you grab. They used to be 5 cents. They're probably a quarter now. That you grab at the cash register, right? And grab one of those. Just a little something sweet, a little something fun on May the 4th, and they just will never feel as important as some of the, like, even the shows I don't like as much. Those just have added weight of canon and feeling like a big piece of story and mythology, whereas these are just little trifles, and it was a completely solid little trifle, and I would not mind getting more of them, like you said.
Agreed. And I'm right there with you. I'm at 8. I think it was good. I like the story. I think it started off, when you see sort of the end of Dark Disciple, and you're like, whoa, this really shakes you up. But then at the end, you see a little bit of ambiguity where you're like, oh, I would have liked it to done something else. But I get it, and I think the formula is working, and it is kind of fun, and it's nice to get extra Star Wars, although they didn't necessarily have to dump it all at once. But I'd say 8's right where we are with this. All right, just so we can kind of wrap up and get everybody out of here. Carl, I wanted to say thank you very much for coming on the program. Always a pleasure. And where can people find this Wampa's Lair business?
I just want to quickly shout out the fact that you called it a program and not a podcast. That's so great. You just dated it so beautifully. I was so delighted to be part of your program, Greg. You can find the Wampa's Lair on all the socials, just at Wampa's Lair Podcast. Find us on any of the podcast streaming places. I mean, the easiest place to find us, Spotify, Apple. We're on YouTube, but Wampa's Lair Podcast. Yeah, and thank you both for inviting me to be part of this. I always love coming on Rebel Base Card. I continue to love the concept behind this show. In a sea of endless Star Wars podcasts, I still think you guys are doing something really fresh, which is really cool. So thanks for letting me be part of it again.
Thank you, Carl. And Greg, who is recording at all hours, anytime.
Yes,
anytime.
the way seeker of the Star Wars podcast.
Well, first, shout out to Wampa's Lair. If people have heard Karl on our show and not given them a try, they do great work, great enthusiasm. I know there's a lot of old crusty guys who listen to our podcast, but if you're on the younger side and maybe want people who care a little bit more about the prequels, Wampa's Lair is a great choice. They did an awesome set of shows across May celebrating the 20th of Revenge of the Sith. I was on one of them. No big deal. No
bigs.
And I also had the pleasure of seeing Revenge of the Sith in the theater with Karl and Jason, which was a treat, and the HoloNet Marauders, who are somewhere right now recording an hour about just one scene from Phantom Menace. So it was a prequel crowd, and it was a lot of fun. Where am I? I don't know. I've lost track. So people can find me on my usual shows. Through the Glass Columns is covering the Wheel of Time books. It's the summertime months. If you're looking for a book project, you could start reading those at the beginning, and we would be your book club through the whole run. We are in book 6, and we are mourning the television show over there, but that's okay. We'll survive. And then LTR Pod, the long take review. We are deep in summer blockbuster series. We were maybe up last night very late recording about Phoenician Scheme, the new Wes Anderson movie, which will be our next episode to drop. And spoiler, one of the co-hosts fell asleep during their screening of that movie, so we have to fill them in on what happened in that movie. And I will tell you, I was cramming this afternoon because coming up next, LTR Pod is going as a group on Force Ghost Connections, and we're talking Jaws on our show and his show because we are 1 week away from the 50th anniversary as we record this. So I was cramming Jaws this afternoon, and you know what's a good movie? Jaws. It's been a while for me, and I hadn't seen it. And it's really enjoyable. So good Jaws coverage coming over on LTR Pod, but then also on Force Ghost Conversation. Anthony, as always, has come up with some really just super difficult questions that I have to try to come up with answers for before I get on the air with him.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. And if you have a question for the Breakfast Pack on the socials, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Blue Sky at Rebel Base Card, or you can email the show, Greg at rebelbasecard.com. We just had Joliet Star Wars Day. I know I got a little bit of audio from, but it was a great time over at Slammer Stadium. And of course, getting into the con season later on this summer, London Film and Comic-Con, and many, many others. So stay tuned to the Rebel Base Card as we are going to be taking on Tales of the Underworld Part 2. Plus, we still have the
sorry, I'm washing my hair that night. Sorry, I can't make it.
We still have Second Breakfast coming up, plus a lot of great card talk, because we know that Legends of the Force is coming out in July, so I'll be excited. And I know Greg will be excited to take a look at those cards as well. At any rate,
I'd like to check out, refuel my ship, prepare for my immediate departure.
I've got to get out of here because my daughter is getting ready to be picked up from driver's ed. And just one last thing, happy Father's Day to all who have served, at any rate. But for Karl, LaClair, and for Greg Cass, my name is Greg McLaughlin, and we are going to return you to your podcast playlist already in progress.
This podcast is not affiliated in any way with Topps, Disney, or Star Wars, nor is it endorsed by Disney or Lucasfilm, and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and or copyright holders here in the U.S. and abroad. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com.
That's it.